And the question becomes, was Luke mistaken about Quirinius and the census? And it reads as follows. Luke 2:1 tells of a decree from Caesar Augustus to have the whole world, and it uses a word, it actually means all the world under the authority of Rome, enrolled in a census report for taxation purposes. Verse 2 specifies which census taking was involved. At the time, Joseph and Mary went down to Bethlehem to fill out the census forms as descendants of the Bethlehemite family of King David. This was the first census undertaken by Quirinius or Cyrenius as governor, or at least as acting governor of Syria. Josephus mentions no census in the reign of Herod the Great, who died in 4 BC, but he does mention one taken by Cyrenius, Antiquities 17:13-5. Soon after Herod, Archelaus was deposed in AD 6. Cyrenius, one that had been consul, was sent by Caesar to take account of people's effects in Syria, and to tell the house of Archelaus. Apparently, the palace of the deposed king was to be 2,000-year genealogy done 2,000 years ago. The 1,000-year genealogy